Mary Joan Doherty, and I work for a small group called ICANN. Have you guys ever heard of ICANN before? New to you? Okay. We're just a small Iowa organization, just a nonprofit. Started up in 1998, although nobody was in Western Iowa that early. You know, it takes a while to get to Western Iowa a lot of times, but ICANN used to stand for Iowa College Access Network, and then a couple summers ago, our board of directors changed that because we were actually trying to do a little bit more than just that, and so they changed our mission statement. So now our mission statement is everything we do is supposed to help Iowans find success in career, college, and life. And so we come out to schools and do presentations like this. Sometimes we do presentations about career and college planning, or to 8th graders in the spring, or freshmen really early in the year, kind of a freshman transitions thing. And then we have offices all over the state. These are our office locations. And in our offices we do lots of things. Probably the biggest thing we do is do FAFSAs, the financial aid application for families. They just bring in their information and we do it for them. But we also have other appointments relating to career and college and understanding loans and understanding how the scholarship process works, just a lot of different types of services. But I'm actually the Northwest Iowa person, so this is where I belong. And my main office is in Sioux City at Western Iowa Tech. Then I go to Orange City about once a week. That's where I was today. And then one of those weeks I go on up to Sheldon. So that's probably the closest office to you that we have. But we're here for you. Sometimes people just call us with questions or email us with questions. But if you wanted help with that FAFSA that senior year, just have a little help and see how it goes. Everything we do is free. We don't charge you a cent for helping you. You'd be welcome to call the number on my card, which is my direct line, or call the 877 number. Any of us can schedule for each other, or go to the website where you can actually make your own appointment at our website. So just know we're here, for lots of help, and be happy to do anything we can to help you with that. The materials, I'll probably reference some of those as we go, but I will tell you this booklet is super helpful. I was a school counselor for 18 years, and I used it myself within my office, and then I was a parent of 3 students that went to college. They're all out now, 3 boys. And as a parent, I learned a lot from this booklet. And a lot of things I talk about are going to be in here, so if you have time later, you can always look some things up in here. And there'll be some page reference numbers kind of usually on that upper right corner too, and that'll just mean that there's more information about that topic on those pages. So I just keep that handy. And then some of the other information I'll just kind of go over as we go. So we're going to talk about financial aid. You both said this was your first time dealing with this, and this is juniors, so this is a great time to hear this information. The financial aid is money to help pay for college, so that's what we're talking about tonight. There's 2 different types of that financial aid. There's what we call gift aid, and if you think about a gift, that's something you just get to use. You don't have to give it back, you don't have to pay it back, it's just yours. And so that's what gift aid is. You don't pay it back, it's just to use. The 2 main types of gift aid are grants and scholarships. I think people kind of understand that about scholarships, that they're yours to use, you don't have to pay them back, but I think the term grant sometimes is confusing to people. Sounds like a governmental term or something, and so what do I have to do with those grants? They're a gift too, just like scholarships. Often the grants are what we call need-based, and that comes from doing this FAFSA that we're going to talk about. The scholarships typically are awarded more on merits, talents, abilities. So often academics enter into scholarships, community service and activities might enter in, awards, honors. They could be based on a specific program, if somebody's really good in math or somebody's really good in technology, any kind of area. So they basically award based on some kind of talent, ability, merit kind of thing. Sometimes scholarships may ask about financial need, but typically they're not totally based on that. But just remember, anything that you see as your students searching for things online, or you start to get financial aid awards that we're going to talk about, anything labeled grant and scholarship is a gift to use. The other type of financial aid is that self-help aid, and that's where the loans come in. So just like any other loan, you do have to pay that back, and there are a couple different types of loans that we'll talk about later that have different types of interest or no interest going on. And then there's another type of self-help aid called work study. And what that is it's a job usually on campus. I read that some colleges are awarding work study for off-campus jobs, but it always used to be on-campus jobs completely. And if the student is offered loans or work study, they can accept them or they can decline them. They don't have to do it. There is a question on this FAFSA that will, it's written toward the student, but it will ask, would you like to be considered for work study? Now, parents typically, when they hear that, understand the considered part, but sometimes if a student's in my office, they think they're signing up for it right there. Just keep in mind, they're just saying, do you want to be considered? And my advice would be, anytime they say, do you want to be considered for a type of financial aid, say yes, because that doesn't mean they're signing up for it. You know, if they are awarded the loan, well, they will be awarded loans, but if they are awarded the work study, they can accept it and try to get a job on campus, or they can decline it if they don't want it. Financial aid comes from these different sources. Some of it's federal. You may have heard of a federal Pell Grant. That's a grant for lower income families. And then the loan I talked about is a federal type of financial aid. The work study is a federal program. So those would be used in any college in the United States. So if you qualify for a Pell Grant, you wouldn't have to go to school in Iowa. You could take that Pell Grant just about anywhere they could award it to you. Whoops. There's some state aid, and that would be specific if you live in Iowa. Do you both live in Iowa? If you live in Iowa and you're going to an Iowa school, then your student might be awarded some aid that comes from the state of Iowa from doing the FAFSA. Then there's institutional sources, so that would be scholarships that come directly from the college or university. And then there are private sources, which we'll talk about a little bit too. Lots of private scholarship opportunities out there. There are some misunderstandings out there. Sometimes people have heard or just happen to think that financial aid is going to pay for everything. So it doesn't matter if we haven't been able to save up. If we do that FAFSA, we're going to need enough money to pay for everything. And that is false. Most of the time that's not true. I do see, at my main office at WIT, I do sometimes see students who are living at home and maybe they qualify for a full Pell Grant and it covers their tuition and fees there at WIT because it's fairly inexpensive there. But that isn't all the time by far, and so most of the time you cannot count on that financial aid covering everything. And then the other misunderstanding is that only financial aid is that gift aid, and that's because we want the grants and scholarships, but sometimes we'll do that FAFSA and we won't be awarded any of those. So we have to remember the loans part of financial aid and the work studies part of financial aid. So from doing the FAFSA, everybody can get the loan if they want it. They just have to accept it or decline it. You apply for financial aid by doing a form called the FAFSA, and FAFSA is an acronym for Free Application for Federal Student Aid. I like to point out the first two words. It is free to apply for financial aid. So if you have somebody try to tell you, or you get on a website and they're wanting you to pay to apply for financial aid, you're not in the right spot. It's a free federal government website. It is just an application. Sometimes when people get done with that FAFSA, they think they're going to know exactly what the student's going to get for money to help them. You don't, because again, it's just the application. You're going to put colleges that the student's interested in on that FAFSA. You can put up to 10 at once. You don't have to put 10, but you can put up to 10. What happens is all the information that it asks for on that FAFSA, it's submitted and then electronically processes, and then it's sent to whatever colleges you put on that form. Then as long as the student applies and is accepted to those colleges, they'll be awarded financial aid. Sometimes they call it a financial aid award. Sometimes they might call it a financial aid package, financial aid letter. But it's just a process, and this application is the process to get that started. Now at the end of the FAFSA, there will be a place that will tell you if you qualify for any part of that Pell Grant that I was talking about. It's going to give you an estimation of that, but a lot of people do not qualify for that, so they won't find that information on there. And then it'll tell you the estimated loan. That's pretty standard, so that does show, but it's not official till the college awards those things anyway. It's basically just a snapshot of your family situation, asks for pretty much the same information from everybody, goes into this form. Like I said, while it's processing, there's a big long formula that takes all that information into account, and then that information is sent on to those colleges. We get asked a lot, should we file the FAFSA? And you may have heard people say, I don't know why you do that, we're not going to get anything. Again, that loan, the only way to get that loan is from doing that FAFSA. And many times families, don't want the student taking out loan, and if they have the means to make that happen, that's great. But we like to remind people that sometimes circumstances change. People lose jobs, just things happen to families. And so at least if you do that FAFSA, that loan's there if they want it. If they don't have to take it, that's great. The other reason we encourage people to do the FAFSA would be because of that state aid. There's something called the Iowa Tuition Grant for Iowa private colleges like Northwestern, Dordt, Morningside, Briarcliff, Simpson Central, Wartburg. There's a ton of them. That is just for those Iowa private colleges, but it comes from doing the FAFSA as well. And more families do qualify for that than they do the Pell Grant, just because there's quite a bit larger threshold as far as income goes on that. And there are some grants that go to community colleges that come from doing the FAFSA as well. Sometimes that depends what the students are going into. But it is the way to get some of that state aid. Also, if you would happen to be a family that's thinking about not doing the FAFSA, I would really encourage you to check with the colleges your student's interested in, because there are some colleges that require the FAFSA to be on file to get the aid that they're giving, the scholarships they might be giving. I've even had that happen with athletes. I don't know if you have athletes in your family, but I've even had that happen with athletes that are going to go on to, say, Iowa State or someplace, and they're going to get this, pretty much full ride scholarship. Sometimes the college has required them to go ahead and do the FAFSA, because if they do qualify for something else, they want to make sure and award them that too. The other reason, and this is a smaller reason, but I have seen some private scholarships that will ask for the EFC, which is the number that comes off this FAFSA. I don't know that a ton of them ask for that, but occasionally there is one, and if you haven't done it, you would have a hard time probably answering that question. So we would suggest, at least give it a try. You don't know for sure what you might qualify for until you do it. I had a few people be surprised. They didn't, not everybody by far, but they didn't think they would qualify for any of the need-based aid, and then they did qualify for a little bit. So until you do it, you don't know probably for sure. This is what the website looks like right now. It does change every now and then. Sometimes the government updates it on a weekend, and it looks different on Monday morning, but that's what it looks like right now. And the key to getting the right website is that .gov. So just make sure when you go to fill it out, if you decide to do it yourself, make sure you go to FAFSA.gov and you'll be on the right site. What happens is the FAFSA is run by school year. So your juniors who will graduate in 21, they'll be starting the fall of 21, so it'll be the 21-22 school year. And that FAFSA is going to open up this coming October 1st. So it's always October 1st when that new FAFSA opens for the next year. So you can't get to it till then. It doesn't even come live. You don't have to do it right then. You may hear rumors that, oh, we got to do that FAFSA that first week of October. There isn't going to be any money left. And I've even heard ads on TV and radio that suggest you better do it right away or you're going to run out of money. At least in Iowa, I can't speak for other states, but at least in Iowa, I don't think it's that dire to get it done immediately. But you do have to look for what we call the priority dates of the colleges. And then also be aware of any scholarship dates that colleges might have, because sometimes their priority dates and their scholarship dates are different. And you want to make sure and do the FAFSA between that October 1st and then whatever the earliest priority date is, or if there's an early scholarship date with any of the colleges they're interested in. To help you with that, in our booklet, starting on page 3, we have a chart that goes on for a few pages or so. And it lists all the colleges and universities in Iowa. We're just a small Iowa group, so that's what we keep track of. And on the right side, the right-hand column, you're going to see all the different priority dates in Iowa. If you need to, if your student's looking out of state, you can call them and ask them what their priority date is, or I do a lot of Google searches. Financial aid priority date for Southwest Minnesota State University or something like that, and you can find out what they are. But if your student's applying to multiple colleges and putting them in multiple colleges on the FAFSA, just find out what all the different priority dates are, and then make sure and submit it by the earliest one, and then you'll be fine for all of them. So in Iowa, the earliest priority date is December 1st, and that's the priority date for Iowa State, University of Iowa, and Morningside. So even for those schools, they've got between October 1st and December 1st to make sure they get it on time. Now, I know, for example, USD, I don't know if you guys send anybody to USD, but in Western Iowa down a little farther to the west and south, a lot of students go that direction. And their priority date, I believe, is April 1st, but they have a scholarship deadline of, I believe, December 1st. It's in December anyway. So you don't, if USD would be on your radar, you don't want to wait for that April 1st priority date or you're going to miss that scholarship deadline. So there's just some different things you have to check into. But it's not like you have to get it done that first week or two. So if somebody tells you that, you tell them, nope, I went to this meeting and that is not true. Unless the college tells you that. Now, there are a few colleges that do have kind of an incentive scholarship. So they might say if you submit it in October or you submit it before November 15th, or they might have some kind of a date like that because they want you to get it done, especially that first year. That might be worth getting it done earlier if they're going to get $1,000 for submitting it a little bit earlier. But that would just be an individual college's incentive kind of thing to try to get you to get it done. When you do submit it, like I said, it takes about, it just reach for that little thing and I miss it. I don't know why I do that. It says it takes about 3 to 5 days to process, but I've noticed that a lot of times it'll process in 2 or 3, but it does take a few days to process, and then once it's processed, it's sent to those colleges. And it does have what we call skip logic. So there might be some families that get to skip certain questions and other families that have to answer more, but that is helpful. In the old days, when it used to be a paper form, you had to answer every question no matter what and read through them. So that skip logic on the online form has made some improvements there. Here's some tips for filing the FAFSA. One of the big pieces of information that goes in there would be tax information. So if you have your tax forms and your W-2s ready, that's really handy. Also, if you decide to do it yourself, if you read the questions really carefully, read the directions, click on the little question mark, helpful hints kind of things, that can be really helpful as well. A lot of times when people make mistakes on the FAFSA, they're just not reading it, completely. And especially that first time, it's really important to do that. So really read the directions and the questions carefully. There's a tool on the FAFSA. It's called the IRS Data Retrieval Tool. And you can try to connect to that, and it pulls in your tax information. It won't, if you're married, filed jointly, which if you're married, that's what most people do, it won't pull in your separate wages. So you still have to have some other information that you have to put in from your taxes, but for the most part, it pulls in what it needs from the taxes. If you're single or head of household, and you're single on the day you did it, and your taxes are single head of household, it'll pull in everything that you need. If for some reason your marital status is different the day you're doing the FAFSA than it was when you did your taxes, then it can't work for you. You have to put it in by hand. And sometimes there are people, there's more of this than I ever would have guessed. Sometimes there are people who have had their taxes hacked into, somebody filed for them, somebody tried to steal a social security number in their household. Those kinds of things put some kind of a hold on their taxes too for security, and those people wouldn't be able to use that tool. But a lot of people can, and it's really slick. But it's handy to have your taxes there because you want to make sure, when you're trying to connect to it, you want to make sure you put your name and address, city, everything just like it is on your taxes to make it a complete match, and that increases your odds of getting that to connect. Sometimes it just connects slick as a whistle, and sometimes people call us and they're just so frustrated because it won't connect. And it's a website, and it's trying to connect 2 different websites. So there happen to be days where it seems like it's not working as well, but it's a really great tool. You do have to do the FAFSA each year. So each year it's going to ask for new tax information from a different year, and then some other things that you have to update every year as well. This form, this is an ICANN form that when I started working for ICANN about 2.5 years ago, I just thought this was the greatest form ever. I didn't have this, I don't think, when I was doing my kids' FAFSAs, but this is a great form. So I'm ready to file the FAFSA. It'll list everything you could possibly need for the students portion and everything you could possibly need for the parents portion. You won't necessarily have all those things. You'll notice it's asking for 2019 taxes. So the taxes they're using are always 2 years behind the year of the fall they're going. So they're going to start school 2021 that fall. It's asking for 2019 taxes. The next year when they're starting, they go back and they're going to school the fall of 22, it's going to ask for the 20 taxes and so forth. Not a problem in the fall when people are doing the FAFSA, but now I'm doing some FAFSAs for this coming fall. People are still doing it. And now some of them are getting their 2019 taxes done. So even when over the phone we'll say bring your 2018 taxes, they think we've made a mistake and they'll bring their 2019. But that's not it, because they're starting classes the fall of 20, so you have to go back 2 years. We call it prior taxes. But if you have all these things that apply to you ready to go, you'll be in really good shape. So I would, again, keep this handy. It's on our website too. We have a lot of really good information on our website if you ever need that. And you could even email me and say, hey, I remember we had this sheet. I can't find it. Could you send me that information again? I would be happy to email it to you if you ever needed that. This is an important part of the FAFSA. It's called the Federal Student Aid ID. And I think you guys said you hadn't done a FAFSA at all. If sometimes parents, if you've been into college and you're paying back student loans, you might already have one of these. Does that apply to you guys at all, paying back student loans? Okay, so you probably you do. So do you have one of these?
I'm done with.
Oh, you're done with it, okay. I do sometimes have parents in here that are like, wait, I think I have one because I've been paying back student loans, and this particular item came to being about 2015-16, and so again, people who've gone back to college sometimes are still paying those loans back. But it looks like you get to create them new, so yay for you. This is, it's a legal signature. The student has to have one, and one parent has to have one. It's a legal signature for both. You use the student one to log in. Sometimes that's confusing when people are doing the FAFSA because they have one. As the parent, they have an ID, so they're sitting at the FAFSA and they think maybe they should use theirs to log in. But if you do that, your information is going in there as the student, and then it's going to be your FAFSA. So always log in with the student FAFSA. And if you read, it's going to say that, but again, when you're looking at something for the first time, it can be confusing. You also use these to try to connect to the IRS on that tool. If your student did taxes in 2019, use that tool to pull in their tax information as well. If they didn't file taxes, that's fine, but it's still going to ask for their wages, just so you know that. So you don't just put 0 everywhere. If they did work, you do put in how much they made. But that's how that ID is used. It's tied to your social security number, so once you have one, you can't create a new one. I sent this to Jillian, and she printed it for you, which is really handy. There's a form here to help you with this FSA ID. There's some instructions at the bottom, and then it gives you a place to put the email that you put on the account, and a username that you create, and then a password that you create. You do this at a different site, and again, it's on this form, but you do this at fsaid.ed.gov, and you go through create an FSA ID 2 whole times. So one time you do it for the student, or the student does it for themselves, and then you go through the create an FSA ID tab again, and do one for the parent. It is important to try to not make any typos. Parents are pretty good about that, but sometimes when students sit down, they're just so used to whacking away at that keyboard, they may not realize they put a number in wrong on their social security number, and that can cause an issue, or they don't type exactly what they thought they meant to type for their username or password. That can cause an issue. So it's important to not make typos, write them down. It's going to ask you guys, as you do it, it's going to ask you to verify your email and verify a cell phone. You need to do that because it's a way to get back into that account to reset the password or something if you can't find it 1 year. If you have multiple children, so like this is your oldest and then you have other children, you'll use the same parent one for that child too. Each student will create their own, but the parent one stays the same. So it's really handy, and then you just want to make sure and keep this somewhere where you can find it. You could create it tonight if you wanted to, but if you do, make sure you put it someplace where in October or so you can find it again. I've had a few parents, really getting all gung-ho about it, which is great, but then they can't think where they put it, because it's been several months in between, which I can understand. But keep it in a handy-dandy place, and you'll use it every year. And, have to use this form. It's just handy to help you keep it straight. So that'll be helpful as well. These are some questions. The next set of information is actually on the back of this ready to file form. It may or may not apply to you guys. Since we have a small group, we may not have to go through all of it, but these are some things that can sometimes be confusing to people. So sometimes people want to know, why does the parent information have to go on the FAFSA? We're not going to pay for college. They're going to be on their own, especially as the student gets a little older. They're 20, 21. Why are we still having to put the parent information on there? We're not helping them. They're on their own. So these are the reasons why. There's a set of dependency questions, and it's on the sheet, and then there are a couple of slides here with them. But these are the questions that determine that, and as long as the answer is no to all these questions, parent information continues to go on that FAFSA. Once one of these becomes a yes, then it won't ask for the parent information, the student becomes independent. But if you look at these, you can see for these juniors, the question's going to be, were you born before January 1st, 1998? Well, that has to be somebody that's going to be turning 24, so that's going to be a no. Are you married? Typically coming out of high school, and for a while they're not. Are they going to be working on a graduate program? Nope, they haven't even started undergrad yet. This basically has to be somebody deployed or a veteran, which isn't going to apply to students coming out of high school. Do they have children or dependents that they're going to have to provide more than half their support during the school year? Occasionally there is a senior that might have a child they're supporting, but most of the time, no. At any time since the student turned 13, were the parents deceased, were they in foster care or a dependent or ward of the court? Again, most of the time, no. But for a student that has a yes there, that would mean they would not have to put their parent information on there. As determined by a court in your legal residence, were you emancipated minor or legal guardianship? I do get some students who are in legal guardianships. That has to be a document from the state where they live, Iowa, and it would have to say that this person is the legal guardian. If that's the case, again, would not ask for parent information, but most of the time that's a no for most students coming out of high school and for a while after that. And then finally, there's a question about being homeless or unaccompanied youth. And again, we do have, in every school, I would say we probably have a student or two who have been designated homeless, and that question would mean they wouldn't have to have parent information. But most of the time, all those are no. And most of the time, all those are no until they're turning 24, they're married, they have a child, or they're going on to a graduate program after they finish their bachelor's degree. So that's why that parent information goes on there for so long. Who's considered a parent? I don't know if you guys would have any questions about this or have friends that would, but basically, you know, if you're married, if the legal parents are married, or if they're unmarried but live together, both parents' information goes on the form. Only one FSA ID, but it'll ask for information about both of them. If the parent's widowed or single, it would just be about that parent unless that widowed parent has remarried. So even if the widowed parent did their taxes on their own, if they were remarried by the time they did that FAFSA, you'd have to take both sets of taxes and put it together. Kind of the same thing about divorce or separated. It's going to ask what day, the month and year the parents may be divorced or got separated. And if that, what happens is they're supposed to use the information about the parent the student lived with more in the last 12 months. And if that parent has remarried, then you have to put both sets of information on there. And again, if the taxes were done separately, but the parent had remarried by the day they're doing the FAFSA, you'd have to take both sets of taxes and put them together. So occasionally in a family, you know, it's a 50-50 split. Court has said it's a 50-50 situation. They absolutely believe it's 50-50. Then you're supposed to go to the parent who provided more financial support in the last 12 months. So if people have questions about that, sometimes they call us about that too, you know, just to make sure they put the same information on. I have a kind of an acquaintance friend, I guess you'd call him, and the first year he did a FAFSA, he didn't come to one of these, and the first year he did a FAFSA, he was confused, and he was divorced, he did a FAFSA for the child, and the mom did a FAFSA for the child, so the child had two FAFSAs out there. I'm not sure what happens to that, but it's not correct. So, you know, I don't remember what they did about it, but I remember him calling for some advice on how to take care of that. And it is confusing. I'm not making fun or anything. It is confusing, but you don't do two separate ones like that. Household size, you know, where this becomes important is depending on how much income you have, you know, how many people are you raising, how many people are you supporting on that income, so you count the student that you're doing the FAFSA for, the parents in that household, any other children or others who live with the parents, and the parents are providing more than half their support. So, you know, if somebody has a niece or nephew or somebody else that's living with them and they're providing that support, they can count them in the household. And then the one that sometimes people don't realize is sometimes a family, this isn't you guys yet probably, but sometimes a family might have an older child, maybe a 21 or 22-year-old, maybe just turned 23, and they're not married, they're not any children, they're not in a graduate program. All those dependency questions would still be no. In that case, whether they're living with a parent or not, they should be counted in the household, because technically if they decide to go back to school and work on anything undergraduate, they would have to have the parent information on there. And some people don't realize they can count them in the household because they're not living at home, you're not, you know, providing their support. But it does become important because you want to make sure and count everybody you can. I always tell people, don't make up people for this question because you might have to, you know, document them eventually. But you do want to count everybody you can because it could help the financial need in some situations. Investments, besides the information it's going to ask for about from your taxes, so your income, if you have child support paid to receive, any of those things. There's also going to be questions that are worded as of today. So these are going to be current values, and that's going to have to do with parent and student assets and investments. So the big thing that goes into that asset and investment question as of the day you're doing the FAFSA would be money that's in bank accounts. So checking accounts and savings accounts. It's going to ask about the student, it's going to ask about the parent. But there's some other investments that have to be included, other investments and assets that also have to be included in that question. And so this is a list, and again, it's on the back of the ready to file the FAFSA form. These are things you would have to include. So you don't include the home you live in, or your cars, or your tractors, or you know, your toys, big toys that people have. You don't include any of that stuff. But if you had other real estate, so sometimes people have some properties they're renting out to others, or inherited a house from a parent that's gone, or part of a house, you know, if it's a sibling kind of situation. That type of real estate you would have to include. not the home you live in, but a separate piece of real estate. However, if you owe on that, so I've had people come in and they have some rental properties, so they own them and they rent them out to others, but they still have mortgages on all of them, you deduct what it is you owe on them, because what it would be is whatever the value of it is if you went to sell it on the market, minus any debt that you have. So you would include that. Students would have to include trust funds and UGMA accounts. You can see money market funds, mutual funds, CDs, stocks, bonds, securities. If you happen to have educational savings plans, such as 529s or Coverdell's, those do have to be counted too. And if you have multiple ones, because you have multiple children, you have to count all of them. They're typically a parent asset because they belong to the parent. And you have to include all of them because you can switch beneficiaries. So if you had 3 children, you had a 529 for all 3, you could switch them from person to person. So that's why you have to claim those. And then again, the bank accounts, like I said.
So do they follow up on that? Like, what if we don't report something?
I don't know what happens, except that at the end, there is this thing that you sign, that you agree and understand, and basically, part of that says that if you are found to be giving untrue information, you can be fined, I don't know, $20,000 and 10 years in prison or something like that. Sometimes people can get verified for their information, so I suppose it'd be possible that somebody would get caught. I've never been involved in that, because I don't do that, and I didn't have anything like that to report, but,
Well,
yeah, I understand what you're saying. What
You
keeps people
forgot
honest?
about a CD or something that
Oh.
you had, or,
Well, I personally think there's a difference between forgot and trying to hide. People forget things and then they find out later and they go back and add them in. I've never run into anybody that was, I would say, definitely trying to hide something, but once in a while that's happened. They'll come, and again, we don't work for the government or a college or anything, we're just a little nonprofit, but as we're going through this question, they tell me about something that fits into those categories, and so I say, well, then we have to include it. Well, they don't want to, and that puts me in a very unethical situation, so I pretty much have to say, well, you told me about it, so we have to put it in there, if you want to take it home, I guess it's up to you how you want to handle it. But I think there's a huge difference between, yes, you accidentally forgot something and you're going to add it back in, and people who are trying to hide things. How they catch that, I'm not sure. So that's a very good question, and I don't have a great answer for you on that. But I would always say people make mistakes, and there's a way to correct that if you do. Certainly. Do any of you own a business? Small business? No? Okay, don't worry about that then. Are any of you farmers? Okay, it's almost always a farmer in Iowa. Once in a while the Sioux City School's not, but almost always. So if you're on a family farm, it's your family farm that you live on and operate, you don't have to count it as an asset. If you have a family farm you live on and operate, and 20 miles down the road you have one, technically the way it reads, you would have to include that other farm. However, you could call the colleges that your student's looking at, and you could explain the situation. They have a lot of rules to follow, but once in a while they have a little bit of gray area they can make a professional judgment on. Most of the time, the investment farms that people have to include would be maybe somebody who lives in town and has this other job, but they have this other farm out that maybe they farm it part-time or they rent it out to somebody else. They definitely would have to. But it's a little gray on that because our farms nowadays do often have some other pieces to them. And the way the question's worded, my boss always says the way the question's worded, when people ask us, we have to tell them that technically if it's not right there with the rest of your farm, according to the definition, you probably would have to count it, but you can always call the college and see how they interpret that question.
so you're talking about the building site, not so much the ground you actually farm.
Well, the whole thing. In the old days when I was growing up, and all my friends were farm families. The house and everything sat right there, and you had the barns, and you had all the acres of beans and corn and whatever, and it was all pretty much attached for the most part. They wouldn't have to include that because it's all one big attached chunk of land.
Mm-hmm.
But nowadays, it seems, more and more farms have that, but then they might have more land or something down the road, or more in another town or something. The way that the definition reads, if you would get online and look up especially online, if you looked at the paper FAFSA, it gives a little better definition of it. Technically, it's all supposed to be attached to what you're living on. But like I said, because farming has changed, you might call the college, and some colleges might say, no, that's really still part of your farm, and that's your main source of income. We wouldn't count that as an extra asset. But there could be a college that interprets that really strictly, and they might say, no, that part that's not attached, you're going to have to figure out what that's worth. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Kind of? It's tricky. I hate when that comes in because, you know, in my mind, this is just Mary Jones' opinion, so this is not this is not anything except Mary Jones' opinion. I feel like that's probably kind of an old question back from the days where pretty much everybody's farm was pretty much all right there. It might go down the road a long way, but it was all connected. But it does seem to me that farming is a lot different now, and people, it just works differently. And they maybe haven't updated that question. But again, that is just Mary Jones' opinion. That isn't necessarily ICANN's opinion or anybody else's. And I've had some people tell me they've called one college and they've said, nope, don't worry about it. And they've called another college and they've said, no, that part that's not attached, you know, you're going to have to figure out what that's worth and consider that an asset.
So we need to call a college then?
Yes.
Actually call the college.
Yep, if that's the situation, yeah, just to be safe. Okay, so any other questions on that? That's probably the hardest thing of the whole thing right there, if you have farmers in the audience, definitely. Okay, you do need W-2s when you do your FAFSA, and again, it'd be 2019 because there's sometimes if you have a 401k, 403b, some kind of a pension from your job, sometimes there's some tax-deferred, elective tax-deferred pension money that's on your W-2, and the question will tell you exactly where to look, but basically you look here in boxes 12A through 12D, and then it's any money that's coded D, E, F, G, H, or S, and it'll say that right in the question. But you do need to check, and you might see other codes on there. Don't include those. Only include any money that's coded exactly like it is on the FAFSA. What I have found sometimes when people call me or they've having some trouble and they come in and have me help them, is sometimes as humans we try to read into things. You know, it says strictly exactly where to look for that, but we see there's a code A or a code DD or something else, and we think, oh, I bet we better put that one on there. No, just follow it exactly as it is. Those questions are cut and dried. There's really no professional judgment on those. So. But I understand that because I tend to read into things too, but I've learned with the FAFSA not to do that. Eventually, once you put all that information in and you have it submitted and it'll electronically process, once it processes, you'll be able to log back on and look at what's called a student aid report, and it's just an official copy of all the information you put on there. It'll have your official EFC that we'll talk about, and that's what determines whether you get the need-based aid or not. If you happen to look at that, it's not a bad idea to log on and look at that. And if you see that you forgot something because you just didn't realize it, and in between, maybe you found out, oh, I should have put that on there, you can get right on there. There's a link that says make corrections, and you can go on and just make the correction and resubmit it. Sometimes if you do the FAFSA early that fall, you might, later in the year, your student might have another college they're interested in. That especially happens to athletes, it seems like. Somebody's interested in them that they didn't know about in the fall. Again, you can log back onto that FAFSA, click make a correction, and add a school at any time as well. Just always make sure if you go in and do a make a correction that you resubmit it, because it doesn't just change and get sent off from changing it. It has to be resubmitted, and sometimes people don't realize that. You might get chosen for verification. Colleges have to pull like at least a third of their families for verification. That just means more information. There'd be a form to fill out. If you forget to use or can't use that IRS retrieval tool, they'll probably ask you, if they chose you for verification, they'll probably ask for a tax transcript or a copy of your taxes, and then they have to go through and just make sure everything's correct. But if you are able to use that IRS data retrieval tool, most of the time it's just going to be a form to fill out. And they'll ask for those household people, you know, you'll put in names and birth dates and how they're related to the student and just some other types of information. It's not hard to do, but it can be confusing sometimes because people just don't know what's going on. So if there's an email to the student or there's any kind of designation somewhere, a letter, anything that says we need more information or something's missing or whatever, it's probably this verification. They just don't always call it that, and that's why it gets confusing. But just do it as soon as you can, because occasionally often this is an email that comes to the student, because the student's email is in the FAFSA, and sometimes they're not very good about watching their email. Part of that would be, okay, here's something. On that FSAID I talked about, it's best for the student not to use their school email, because it'll be fine right now, but the next year, if they have to go on and reset their password or something, then they're not going to be able to get to that email because the school usually gets rid of it. So typically they're putting a Gmail or a Yahoo or something in that thing, and so that's what's in the FAFSA. So they might be watching their school email because they're always probably getting harped at school to make sure they're watching their email, but they forget they need to watch that Gmail or that Yahoo or whatever. So on the FAFSA itself, if you would rather put a different email in there on the FAFSA, you can. You could put a parent email for the student on the FAFSA if you wanted to, and then you'd be the one getting emails. But the main thing is somebody needs to be watching whatever email's on the FAFSA for the student, because sometimes that email comes, and if they don't respond and you don't get that verification taken care of because you didn't know it, it'll hold up your financial aid. And I've had a few families where it held it up all year long because the student, bless their hearts, just didn't see the email or just didn't realize it was that important. So that's the main thing. And if you do get verified, you can call us with questions. You might have to read to me exactly what it says, and I can try to help you. But you could also get a hold of the College Financial Aid Office and ask them if you are, and if I didn't understand what was going on, that's what I would have you do. But a lot of times if you read it to me, I can say, yep, you're getting verified, so you need to do whatever it says or something like that. Sometimes a family might have special circumstances. You might not right now, but even by the time your student goes to college, you know, if you think about, you're using 2019 taxes, so that financial information from 2019 for a school year that starts in, say, August of 21, a lot of things can happen in between there. In fact, things can happen once the school year starts even. So if you feel like at some point that information from whatever tax year you're using doesn't really match your circumstance of when the student's actually in college or sometime during that year, you can apply to the college or report to the college that you think you have a special circumstance. And there's, again, a form to fill out. There's always documentation involved, and then they'll kind of refigure with that information and see if maybe we have more need than the FAFSA suggested. The biggest reason I see that happens is a change in employment. Somebody loses a job, or they've changed jobs and they're making far less than they were, or that was just a really good year for them, and most of the other years are nothing like that year that they had to put on the FAFSA. Occasionally, it could be a change in a marital status. You know, there were 2 incomes, and now there's just one because there's only one parent that you have to report. Medical expenses, dental expenses. Sometimes there's some major things that happen, big accident, which is not good, but it does happen sometimes, and there are these bills that have piled up. There's no place to put any of that information on the FAFSA. So you just make sure to contact the college financial aid office and tell them you think you have a special circumstance. They might even be able to kind of ask you about it on the phone, and then by what you tell them, they might be able to tell you, oh yeah, you definitely need to fill this out because I think that might make a difference or something. But it can't be done in the FAFSA, it has to be done with the colleges. There's a financial aid application for Iowa as well, very short, nothing like the FAFSA. So if you get on that FAFSA and then at the end of it you see this thing about the state application and you think there's no way I'm going to sit here and do another financial aid application right now, it is so short, it's not even funny. And so when you get to the end of the FAFSA, I would suggest you go ahead and do that because there's so many Iowa colleges that if there's any chance they might possibly go to a school in Iowa, take the time to do it. If you click on that link, it will populate a lot of information in there. You don't put anything really financial in there, it's just some other questions that come up. And there's just some extra aid that they might be qualified for. The only way to get to this is a Terry Branstead Iowa State Fair Scholarship. If your student is involved in 4-H or FFA or something where they've actively participated in the Iowa State Fair, there's a scholarship application. And the only way to do it is to do this Iowa application. So just do that. If for some reason you don't do it that day, you can do the Iowa application on the College Aid website as well. But take a few minutes and do that. Okay, sometimes people would like to know kind of how financial need is, how they come up with your need. And it is a formula, it's a kind of an involved formula, but we can kind of put it in layman's terms, so to speak, to give you an idea. So as far as the Federal Department of Education, federal government is concerned, the parents have the primary responsibility. Unless those questions, like I said, those dependency questions, one of them becomes a yes, parents still have responsibility according to them. And so their parent information weighs in the heaviest of all. Students have some responsibility, so their information goes on there. It weighs in some, but not as heavily as the parents. Again, like we said earlier, everybody's asked pretty much the same questions and evaluated on the information that is given from whatever tax year it is and whatever your assets and such are worth that day, investments. That information goes into this formula and it comes up with this number called the EFC, which is the expected family contribution. Many times when people see this number at the end of the FAFSA on the confirmation page, they kind of half flip out because it's called expected family contribution. So if that number comes out to be $11,500 and you don't have $11,500 saved up, what's your first reaction? how can they expect me to pay that? In fact, I had a Facebook message from a kind of a former coworker. I used to be a teacher and a counselor, and I had helped her finish up her son's FAFSA. It was her first one, and apparently she'd gotten back the student aid report and such, and the official EFC, and she Facebook messaged me just last week and said, I think the federal government has overestimated how much money I have saved up for my son to go to college because we just received his EFC and there's no way I can pay that. So I reminded her, it's not necessarily what you're going to have to pay for college. It is what they have to use to determine whether you get that Pell Grant or whether you get the Iowa tuition grant, but for those private colleges, but again, there's a higher threshold for that. And I remember as a parent and a school counselor, when I did my first FAFSA and I saw that first EFC, I thought the exact same thing. Holy cow, what are they thinking? You know, there's no way, we have 3 kids, we can't pay this. But again, I didn't end up paying that. But it is an important number because it determines that financial need. So it's a number the college has to use. It could be a 0. You know, a person with a 0 EFC is going to get a lot of need-based aid. But it could also go up into 5 digits. I even have seen a 6-digit EFC, not often, and I wondered if it was right when I saw it, but that's what it said. But it could be, you know, a big range there. But it's the lower EFCs that are going to qualify for that need-based aid. If you really like numbers, I don't know if you do or not, you can go to this website and you can search the EFC formula and you can kind of see how the different pieces of information go into a formula. You can even kind of pick a formula that seems to apply to your family and plunk some information in and see what happens. I've never actually done it. I've looked through it, but I've never actually sat down and done it. But some people kind of enjoy things like that. Okay, so just to get a little bit more specific about that EFC, that number, remember the parents' information weighs in the heaviest, so they look at that. Your adjusted gross income is big, so whatever your adjusted gross income shows on your taxes, that weighs in a lot, but it's kind of balanced by how many people are in your household, so how many people are you supporting on that income, and how many students are in college at once. You know, if you have 2 in college at the same time or 3 in college at the same time, that's a bigger burden, so that's going to make your need a little higher, but still in some families it's not going to matter. It depends on that adjusted income a lot, adjusted gross income a lot. They do look at those parent assets. That was the money in the bank and those other investments that we talked about. They do protect part of that. And the older parent is, so if there's 2 parents, it'd be the older one of the 2. They do protect more of that depending on how old that parent is. And as you guys look very young. But as you get older, if you have other children, you're going to have your assets protected a little bit more. You might not have protected quite as much right now. I was always a little bit older parent because I didn't have my first child till I was 29, and then I had 2 more after that. So I thought, well, finally there's a little bit of a bonus for being an older parent, but it didn't help us a lot. But whatever that protection is, depending on your age, then they'll take 12% of whatever's left over. And those pieces of information go into the parents' part of that EFC, and again, weighs heavier. For the students, they're looking at their total income after taxes, but they protect this much of student income approximately. And a lot of students don't make more than that in a year. If they did, after you take that $6,660 off, that part, whatever's left, they would take half of that, and then they would look at the student assets, which might be a little money in a savings account or a little bit of money in a checking account for most students. They take 20% of that. So people sometimes say, well, what if my child has saved up a lot of money? I always say good for them because they got some money to pay for college. That'll mean less loans. But the way they look at it is they're getting penalized. You know, if they've been able to save up money in the end, it's still going to help them because, again, most people don't get that full Pell Grant by any means, and at least then they can maybe use some of that money for college as opposed to having to borrow a whole bunch. So, but that is the students part of the EFC, and then added together that becomes the family EFC, which again could be 0 to 5 digits or whatever. And I do see 5 digits 4 and 5 digits quite a bit. If you like to estimate your costs, again, besides that EFC formula, there are calculators. Every college, it has to have a calculator on their website where you can plunk in some information and see, you know, what your family's financial need might be. We have one on our website. We've got some information in the booklet about that as well. Once the FAFSA has been processed and your student has applied or been accepted, and it really doesn't matter what order they do that. You could apply the colleges first and then do your FAFSA. You could do your FAFSA first and then apply, but you want to do them fairly close together because you don't want to wait too long and again miss scholarship deadlines or something like that. But once that's happened, eventually you will get a financial aid award or financial aid package from all of those colleges that they've thrown the FAFSA and they've applied to and been accepted. The colleges will talk to you about their direct costs. Those are set for you. Your tuition and fees and room and board, it's going to be a certain amount regardless of how much you don't want it to be. It's just the way it's going to be. Now sometimes that's going to be a sticker price, and sometimes sticker prices can be scary. And when you look at that chart, it starts on page 3 of all the colleges, you can see that when you look at some of that tuition, fees, room and board, it is scary. But think of it as a sticker price. And typically we don't pay sticker prices for things. Typically there's something that comes off of it. So don't let that scare you. However, if your student is really set on a school or two with a high sticker price, I would always advise you to have a backup plan. Have another college that's a little more affordable, and always have one college, kind of we call it a safety, that no matter what, they could go there without, borrowing the whole bank, something like that. But those direct costs are set for you pretty much. Just don't be afraid of them. Then there are indirect costs, and a lot of times the colleges will estimate what you might have to spend on these things, but you do have control there. They might estimate you're going to need a certain amount for books, but you might be able to get some used books. You might be able to rent some books cheaply. You can look online nowadays. It's far different than when I was in college, and you can compare and shop as long as you get the right book. Sometimes if it's an online class, the book's embedded, I think is what they call it in the class, so then there isn't an extra cost. But books can be pricey. It's just that you have some control over what you're going to spend on. Some, not all, but some. Then, of course, your transportation, your miscellaneous and personal expenses, those are going to come little by little throughout the year. It's not like you have to pay them up front, but sometimes they might give you an estimate. So if you're a budgeter, you could include that in to kind of estimate what you might need for the year, but you don't have to worry about having that ready to go at the beginning of the semester, okay? So indirect costs you have some control over, direct costs are set for you. When you get your financial aid packages, this is hard because people want to know, how are we going to know where those are? Sometimes you're going to get it in the mail. Some colleges still do the old-fashioned mail, and they'll mail it to you in a letter, and you'll see the charges, and you'll see what it's going to cost and see what they're offering you. Some might send it through email. Some, there's a student portal that they're assigned once they've been accepted, and you might find it under that student portal account under financial aid. I was talking to USD and Briarcliff. They were at a presentation the other night, and they both, I think, if I remember right, said that they actually send an email out to the student that says, here's the portal, go to this, and you're going to have to look for it there. So there's no one set way to tell you for sure how you're going to know, but you can always ask the colleges. How am I going to know? I've set my, my student's been accepted, I've set my FAFSA, where do we watch for this financial aid? And they should be able to tell you that in a heartbeat because it's set for them. They know how they do it. But you want to look at those, you can compare. It's kind of like comparison shopping in a way. What's this one offering you and what's the bottom line I'm going to owe here? What's this one offering you and what's the bottom line I'm going to have to come up with here? And make some decisions based on some of that information. This is an example of in my opinion, a pretty straightforward financial aid package. You'll see that the direct costs are up here by semester and then total. And then you'll see that they've estimated the indirect costs, but remember, you're not going to need all that. Especially the transportation and personal. Those are going to come, little by little. So just for this, looking at this, we're going to count those in because we're going to say we want a budget and make sure we have enough money, kind of worst case scenario. So if you add those together, it's going to be about $24,000. If you look at this financial aid award right here, you're going to see the total is $24,000. So our first thought's going to be, yay, I could go here because it's all covered. And that is true. However, you want to look closer because you're going to see that this is your gift aid right here. You're getting some Pell Grant, a scholarship, a local scholarship. So $6,350 is part of the grant and scholarship gift aid. So that's good. But then notice that the next two are loans, which you get to accept or decline. But they are loans, and so over $15,000 of that 24 is loan. Now that doesn't mean you can't do that. You just need to be aware that that's all going to be paid back by somebody. Then you'll see that there is work study on this one as well, which you also get to accept or decline. Can't necessarily put that on the bill, but they get paid weekly or bi-weekly or whatever it happens to be. They can use that for the incidentals. They could save some of it up for books for second semester, however you decide to do that. You can't count on it for your bill, but it is at least some extra money coming in. So with all your different financial aid awards, you can, like I said, compare and see how much of it's gift aid, how much is left over, and then decisions have to be made. This is an example of one of those kind of scary sticker prices, that $43.9. That's pretty high. Some families look at that and say, you can't go there, don't even look. And like I said, don't be afraid of it, just always have some backup plans. College B, a little bit more like maybe a state university in Iowa. That's probably about a tuition fee, room and board cost for a state university in Iowa. So big difference in the sticker prices. But if you look at the scholarships and grants awarded, often those high sticker price, private colleges, usually they are, have more scholarships to give. And then you might get some need-based aid from doing the FAFSA. So sometimes it can come out that this expensive college has a lot more money to give, gift aid, than the less expensive college. So in the end, the remaining cost, it's still more to go to college aid, but the difference has come down tremendously. And that is always a possible scenario. But whatever that remaining cost is, that's where you have to sit down and figure out how can we pay the rest of that. Okay? And that's for a year. It's not like you have to pay that, the first day. That's for a year. So if you'd like to know more about financial aid packages, we have some videos on our site that talk about that. One of the ways that you can pay some of that remaining cost are private scholarships. Private scholarships are scholarships given by private donors or organizations, businesses, a ton of them out there. And you have a person that gets a lot of that information here. Your school counselor is sent tons and tons of private scholarship information. Some of it will be local, so just for your students here at Sibley Cheaton. Some might be for the county. Some could be statewide, some could be national, but she gets a lot sent to her. So it's important for your student to know how that's going to be dispersed, what they have to do. It will take some time to do some applications, but there is a lot of money out there. And even if they're just for, a lot of these are just for seniors coming out of high school, and so even if it's just for that 1 year, at least that's a year they're not taking out loans, or you don't have to dip into your savings as much, things like that. You can also check with your parents, or like you guys, or your students' employers. Sometimes an organization that you work for has a scholarship that you may or may not know of, so don't be afraid to ask. Churches, professional organizations, religious organizations. Where I was at Maple Valley Anthony-Oto, if you've ever heard of that. The Anthon Catholic Daughters had a scholarship, but they didn't send it to the school because it was through their church, and you had to be at the church, to find out about it. My little Methodist church in Mapleton, Iowa, they had a scholarship, but they didn't send it to the school. You had to be at church or read the newsletter, something to find out about it. Sometimes I've seen rural electric companies, WIPCO, REC, that have scholarships. I've seen some internet cable providers, the NetINS, I don't know if that's over here, but that's a little farther over in south than east. They give a scholarship to their subscribers. So just keep your eyes and ears open. There's lots of private scholarships out there. It just takes a lot of time and some organization to keep it all straight and meet the deadlines. And then there are some legitimate websites out there that have some scholarships too, including we do keep a scholarship database on our website as well. And those are in the booklet as well. But again, your best friend when it comes to those private scholarships for seniors in high school is going to be your high school counselor. They can't do them for you, and they shouldn't have to look for students and hand them to them even, but they all get that information out there, and there's a lot of money available for that. Most schools that I go to, including the one I was at, will tell you too that a lot of times not a lot of students are applying for those. So you have a class of 60, you think that 50 of them are going to be applying. What are my chances? Not necessarily true. Sometimes the same 10 kids apply for everything, and so guess who gets all the scholarship money? Those 10 kids, because the other 40 or 50 didn't take the time to do it. So don't think that. And the other thing is I found that sometimes parents think if their student doesn't have that top GPA, they're out of luck for scholarships. Not true either, because they look a lot of them look at activities they were in and leadership positions and volunteer experiences and employment. Those kinds of things can factor in too. Sometimes they're going to have a GPA requirement, but it's not always going to be like a 3.5. I've seen some of a 2.0 or a 2.5 or a no GPA requirement at all. I'd be a little leery of that if I was given a scholarship. I think I'd want to make sure they at least were getting C's, but that's just my own opinion. So yeah, don't think that they're not there, because they are. Scholarships for everyone out there. Are you guys Farm Bureau members? They give scholarships. So you probably know about Farm Bureau. They're in every county in Iowa. And one thing they do is they like to help students with education. So they give $1,000 renewable scholarships. Again, they're not all renewable, but they do have to be in certain programs. And you can find, if you go to Iowa Farm Bureau under member benefits, you can find the application for this year, and you can see the exact programs that are allowable for this scholarship. Many of them are ag-related, but there's also nursing on there, there's education on there. But it's a very good scholarship. This year, for this year's seniors, it's due February 28th. When I was a counselor, it seems like it was always due March 1st, but March 1st is a Sunday this year, so I'd say it's usually due somewhere in that vicinity, okay? But check that out, because they want to give those scholarship awards out. And they also, some of the county offices also have them. And so this is Osceola County, so they might have a separate scholarship for those people, those students in this county too. So it could be 2 possible Farm Bureau scholarships that your student could be eligible for. So remember that for next year. We have another video about scholarship tips if you're interested in that. We have all kinds of stuff on our website. Finally, on that remaining cost, if you just don't quite have enough aid from the college, don't quite get enough private scholarships, you don't quite have enough saved up to pay the rest of the bill, sometimes students have to take out loan. And again, from doing that FAFSA, they will be awarded or offered that it's a direct Stafford loan from the federal government. Again, you don't have to take it at all, or they can just take part of it. But there are 2 different types of that. There's the subsidized and the unsubsidized. The subsidized is need-based. It's not necessarily a clear-cut EFC number. The college looks at different things and determines if maybe that family could need some of that subsidized loan. And the difference is that subsidized loan, the government's paying the interest while they're in college. The unsubsidized loan, that interest is just like any other loan. It's going to start accruing as soon as you take some of it out. So if your student's offered some subsidized loan, know that that's the better one of the 2. So if they just need a small loan, like not the whole thing, have them take out that one, and then that interest isn't building up. But this is entirely the student's loan. Parents don't co-sign, no parent credit score. It is the students, and their name is on it to pay it back. There are limits you can see. Each year it's a little different, and then you'll see the subsidized portion is also limited. So the most any student could get that freshman year in subsidized loan would be $3,500, and if that's what they got, then they'd also be offered $2,000 of it as unsubsidized. It doesn't matter how wealthy the family is. If they need or want that student to take out a loan because they just want them to have that experience, they can take out the unsubsidized loan. Anybody could get that. There is a 6-month grace period when the student's done with college before they have to start paying it back. They try to get people to pay them back within 10 years, and if you can, you want to, because that interest is going to be building up by then. There's a little fee, so if you take out $2,000, the money that actually goes on your account to pay your bill isn't going to be quite a full $2,000, because there's that 1.069% that comes out of it, and it goes directly to the school. The grants and loans, the school gets all that money, and then they disperse it to the student's bill. And then I know, like at WIT, sometimes students have extra money left, and they actually get that to the students after a certain day of classes. They get a little bit of a reimbursement. I would say that doesn't happen often at a 4-year school. It could. They got a whole bunch of scholarships and things. It could. But it probably doesn't happen as often at a 4-year school as at WIT at a community college. A college may offer, as part of that financial aid award, they may offer a Parent Plus loan. It's a federal loan, but it's entirely the parents. The student's name is not on it. It's the last few years it's had kind of a high interest rate. It's lower this year. Last year it was like 7.6 or something like that, which is very high in today's world. It's also got a high fee. Where that direct Stafford loan had a 1.069, it's got a almost 2.8. So, we've been telling people the last few years that seems to be the only loan that many of the colleges are able to tell you about. But don't just grab that because that's the only thing you know of. Because there are also private loans out there. And private loans can be taken out by the student with a parent cosign and a parent credit check. Or they can be taken out by the parent, either one. But sometimes parents don't need that loan because they've got mortgages and all these other things. So again, that Parent Plus loan, it is totally the parent's loan. So if you're interested, if it comes to that point and there's a little bit more loan needed, we suggest you check Iowa's student loan because they've been doing some really good interest rates for families, and it's an Iowa company, so it's a little bit smaller than the other companies like Wells Fargo, Sallie Mae, Discover, but they are also legitimate private lenders for education as well. They have a little bigger range of interest rates. They go higher and they go a little lower. So you can always comparison shop. Certainly, that's what you want to do if you have to take out a private loan, is you want to comparison shop and try to find out where you can get the best interest rate. But just make sure you know if you're signing up for a student loan, like I said, with a parent cosign or a parent loan, because there'll be a difference legally, and who has to pay that back. when it comes to loans, we want to make sure that you and your student understand there's philosophically a connection between what the student might receive for a salary that first year on the job and how much loan they should take out as a maximum in however many years they're going to be in school. Typically, when a student goes to a short-term program at a community college, they're not going to end up so far in debt they can't get out of it. But often when you get to those 4-year degrees or master's degrees or whatever, that's when the heavy student loan usually kicks in. So they can do some research in the programs they're looking at, those careers they're looking at, and whatever those starting salaries are looking like, if they think they can make, and if they're going to come back to Iowa and they're going to make $37,000 that first year, they shouldn't borrow much more than $37,000 in total loan for that program. What happens is if a student borrows $80,000 or even $50,000 or $60,000, and they're going to have a starting salary of $35,000, $36,000, $37,000, under $40,000, that's a lot to pay back, and those payments are too hefty, and they can't do it, and that's when they get into trouble. Or then they extend the loan longer, and then that interest just builds and builds and builds. And I've had some students come in and they're so frustrated because they owe so much money because they just borrowed too much, and then they're trying to spread it out, and it's just very scary. So just try to keep that total loan to about what that starting salary would be, and they'll be okay. And I have that example. I have 3 boys, all got bachelor's degrees. One ended up getting a master's degree before he went into the world of work, but that one only borrowed about $2,000. He was a saver and a worker, and he got some scholarships, and he was okay. One of them borrowed probably $17,000, and he's getting that paid off, and the other one borrowed about, I think maybe $37,000, something like that. But his starting salary was about that, so he's doing okay. He's not wealthy, but he's doing okay. He has a house and a car and different things. So it does seem to work if you can kind of keep it to that limit. And then finally, like I said, you compare financial aid awards, and hopefully every school that you're looking at has the program they want. Some families have a hard time telling their child no. It looks like they're going to have to borrow way too much to go here, but they don't want to tell them no. Other families just try to lay it on the line and say, this is just going to work. We can't help you with this, and if you do this, you're going to end up owing this much money. And sometimes numbers will speak to kids, sometimes not so much. It just depends on the child probably. But you have to decide that as a family. There's no right or wrong answer. You can often do a payment plan if there's a little bit left over. That's what we did with our boys. We wanted to help. We didn't want to pay it all. They had to take care of a lot of themselves, but we wanted to help. So with each college they went to, we did some payment plan stuff, like an extra little car payment or bigger car payment. They'll work with you on that if you want. Loans, like I said, maybe the student works a little harder in the summer to try to save up a little more money that can help with a little bit. Sometimes they just have to pick a less expensive school. Again, it's just a family decision. And then when they do decide where they want to go, accept that financial aid award. When you know whether or not you need the loan, you can accept or decline it. Same thing with the work study. If the student does take out that federal direct loan, that's all the students, they do have to, and the college will send you this information, or send the student the information, but they do have to get on the federal student loan site. They log on with that FSA ID. It's only used for the FAFSA and for the federal student loan site. And they'll have to do this, it's called entrance counseling, and it just takes them through some activities to try to explain loans, how interest works, has them try to figure how much loan they might have when they finish, and how that's going to translate into payments. If they take it seriously, you can really learn from it, but sometimes they're just trying to get through the end of it. But they do that online, and then it sends to the college that they completed it, so they know that they've done it. And then they sign the master promissory note online and let the college know how much of that loan they want, and that's taken care of. If they don't need it, then they just decline it. Or they might decline it first semester because they have enough money. Maybe second semester they have to take it out. That happens sometimes too. So for help, you have a school counselor, and if she isn't sure, she'll call me and I'll find out. You can call me or email me some information. Also, your college admission and financial aid offices, don't be afraid to ask them questions, especially if it's specific to their school. They're used to answering questions, and they can find out answers, especially, again, when it's specific to their particular college. But anytime you call us or come in for an appointment or anything, again, we don't charge you or anything. We just are here to help in any way we can. If your student's still looking at colleges, we have a college fair in Cedar Rapids, which is a very long ways from here, I know, on March 29th, but it's a nice big college fair. And then we have another one in Des Moines in September. Still quite a ways for you guys clear up here, but if you feel like a trip to Des Moines, it's out by the Adventureland, so you can make a weekend of it, or actually the big Prairie Meadows casino is out there too, if you're like that kind of thing. But anyway, anybody's invited to that. We have 130 college reps usually, and we also have like some breakout sessions, career people, stuff like that. So I will take questions definitely. It won't take long, probably with 3 people, but if you don't mind, before you go, in fact, since there's only 3 of you here, I might give you one too if you don't mind. You don't have to. I can't force you to do it. But we do collect a lot of information from our, just as part of our being in existence to have people that financially support us. So if you don't mind filling this out and putting, what was new knowledge, what you already knew, or if you didn't hear that tonight, that's okay too. And then on the back, there's some more questions if you have time, but at the bottom of the back, if you would like to sign up for e-alerts, or we have like tips that come out, like tips of the week. The senior year, if you put the year your child's going to graduate, we'll specifically mark that, and that senior year you'll get alerts and reminders about different things that have to do with the college process, the financial aid process. You can put an email in for student or parent or both. Just make sure we can read it, and we'll get you signed up for those. And if you don't want them, that's okay too, because some people don't want that in their inbox, and that's absolutely fine.